TMV was going to be our problem. TMV has been studied for a very long time. It's one of the most studied viruses out there. And in 1969, there was a paper published in which they were trying to enrich the TMV coprotein. And we're not trying to enrich the TMV coprotein, but we'd like to get rid of all of it, which is similar in that concept. And so what they were doing is they were using a combination of bentonite, which is a clay-like material that can be used as a clarifying agent in foods, especially juices and wines, and addition of magnesium chloride and pH. So we were like, well, the bentonite is actually food grade and everything already, so it could actually fit in our process and not be a problem. So this might work for us. So we decided we would start to look at this and try some things out. So when we did that, we screened pH versus magnesium bentonite and magnesium bentonite combinations. And what we found is pH extracts of pH 4 and 6.5 showed greater than 50% reduction in the coprotein content, and that's what's here in gray. And so specifically, we see a really great reduction in the TMV coprotein of about 75% when we go all the way over here to pH 4 with magnesium chloride and bentonite together, with still maintaining 80–85% of our Griffithsin content. So this isn't optimized at this point in time, but it is promising there. So the next thing we actually started looking at were the concentrations of bentonite and magnesium chloride. So we developed a matrix here looking at bentonite concentrations here and magnesium chloride concentrations there, and seeing how the concentrations impacted each other. What we found was that the 0.1 molar magnesium chloride was highly effective at reducing the coprotein and leaving the Griffithsin intact at any concentration of bentonite, which was quite helpful for us. So this can all be seen on these gels. So this is a representation of the 0 mg per mil with different concentrations of magnesium chloride. There's 2 replicants per, and similar here for 10 milligrams per mil bentonite. And these are densimetric measures of these bands. Now later we'll get into some other things where we're using ELISAs and stuff like that to, well, we're going to get to it right now. So from that, what we decided to move on with was the 10 mg per mil bentonite and the 0.1 molar magnesium chloride. So primarily because the 10 mg per mil bentonite was making a good filter aid for our filtration steps. And you needed 10 mg per mil made a nice cake that would develop in the filter press. So you can see here magnesium chloride, bentonite, magnesium chloride with bentonite, and then this is just an extract. And we've been incubating these extracts at 4 degrees C overnight in accordance with the paper that we found on enrichment. So, the other thing to note here is we took Griffithsin and we ran it on a GP120 ELISA. Now, a GP120 ELISA is, I don't know if you're familiar with ELISAs, it's a amino-based assay where you use antibodies to detect protein. And so we immobilized GP120, which is the coat protein on HIV, on the bottom of a plate. Then we put Griffithsin on there to see if Griffithsin would bind to that protein. This is where its activity comes from. So its ability to bind the glycoprotein on HIV's surface. So if we're binding that still, it means we should still have good activity, antiviral activity. So we're using it as a surrogate marker here. So we put GP120 on a plate and we looked at the activity of Griffithsin in all of these, because we were concerned that maybe we were denaturing it, maybe there was some loss in activity, and we were just getting clean protein out, but not clean active protein. So what we found was that the bentonite, the magnesium chloride, and the bentonite magnesium chloride treatments all produce relatively similar activities with no significant differences. So they're all active. So then we decided we would look at TMV and detect TMV. When we looked at direct detection of TMV, and then with the bentonite, the magnesium chloride, and the bentonite magnesium chloride mix, and then actually quantified that, we saw that the magnesium chloride had a significant reduction in coprotein. The other two did not. Well, the other two had a significant reduction compared to the control, but did not have a significant reduction compared to each other. So basically the winner is this magnesium group right here. So we got a great amount of coprotein that's moved out, so we've kind of narrowed down our process down to using magnesium chloride or magnesium chloride bentonite. The problem at that stage was our product was still green. So when you have a green product like that, it's not looking good to move it forward. And we tested a lot of different ideas. So we came back to chromatography. And a polishing chromatography step was decided that we would add that at the end of this to finalize the product manufacturing here. So the product was then filtered and then polished using a multimodal chromatography. And MMC chromatography is a cation and hydrophobic chromatography step. So it has both properties, that's why it's a multimodal chromatography. And we were able to bind Griffithsin to it and help to remove the color and the residual coprotein. So when we took the extracts from the previous and ran them through the chromatography, what we found was when we didn't treat it with magnesium chloride or bentonite, we had 97% purity. When we treated it with magnesium chloride alone, we had 98% purity. Magnesium chloride bentonite produced 99% pure product, which is similar to the product that we were making with the original process. This is a Western blot showing the coprotein, and you can see for the magnesium chloride bentonite that it is no longer there. So you'll note at one time that I told you the magnesium was great and magnesium chloride bentonite wasn't working so good. This step right here is what we kind of think changed all of that. So we were centrifuging instead of filtering, and the particles weren't big enough to be caught and centrifuged down. But when we added a filtration step, the particles were large enough to be filtered out. And so it changed which one of these was the best for us, because the magnesium, so what's supposed to happen with magnesium chloride is it strips the coprotein off of the virus, exposing the RNA, and then the bentonite interacts with the RNA to aggregate the virus, and that's how it helps to pull it all out. And so it would be quite possible that with magnesium alone, that you're pulling more coprotein off and it has nothing to catch it, and so it is just flowing through in your solution. So we had a process that we wanted to move and scale up, so we took it to an industry partner of ours. We put 5 kilos of plant material, we extracted it at pH 4, heated it, filter pressed it, then we put it in bentonite magnesium chloride, and overnight incubation, filter pressed it again, then ran our MMC chromatography, and then formulated it with UofL into PBS. At the end of that, we had recovered 66% of the protein that we started with. And this was determined with a GP120 ELISA looking at activity again. So we started with 5 kilos of plant material, and it ended up with 1.5 grams of product. And to further elaborate on this, this is what the extracts look like. Somewhat dirty. You can see our primary contaminant is here. Our protein of interest is here. We heated, we filter pressed, we bentonite magnesium chloride and filter pressed to, oh, sorry, I was pointing at the wrong one there. I was one behind. So we heated, then we filter pressed, and then we bentonite magnesium chloride and filter pressed. Sterile filtered and loaded on the MMC chromatography, and so we end up with clean product again. You can see here the coat protein's gone. Densitometry on this showed a 72.25% recovery. So our two methods are fairly close. One says 66, one says 72.5. So we're recovering 65 to 70% of the protein, and it's 99% pure. So we doubled our recovery from the original and reduced the complexity of the process. We removed one chromatography step, and this was directly scalable to our industrial partners. So it allows us to scale it even more to produce kilos of product. Which brought me to the next step, which is a technoeconomic analysis of this manufacturing process. Because the concept, as I kind of mentioned earlier, if you're making microbicides, they need to be available to people to purchase. Right now, the industry is estimating that $1 per dose would be your upper limit on your cost of goods. So we looked at a 20 kilos annual production of Griffithsin, which would equate to about 6.5 million doses, and with some look into the market and things, that's about a 10% market capture, meaning that we're only talking about getting people that could use our product. We're only planning on 10% of them adopting it, which would equate to about 6.5 million doses. So for this model, we assumed the 0.52 grams per kilogram of expression, which was what we achieved in the previous studies, with a 70% recovery. Now, our batch sizes are going to be 14,459 plants, which was then equivalent to 584 kilograms of biomass to process, 300, which would express about 300 grams of Griffithsin, and we would recover 210 grams of that. To achieve our 20 kilos a year production, we then have to make 95 batches per year, requiring an plant operation of 330 days a year for a 24-hour operation, which is considered 90% online. Basically, you get 5 holidays out of the year, and your plant's running constantly, like most of your large-scale manufacturing. So if you walked into this theoretical plant at any one point in time, you would have 6 batches of plants in the germination stage, 1 in the pre-inoculation stage, 4 in the post-inoculation stage, and that is all considered the upstream component of this model. And so there'd be 159,000 plants in there at one point in time, plus 1 batch being processed. There'd be 3.5 days between batches and 11 concurrent batches. Downstream is what's going to consist of your extraction, your clarification, your purification, everything after the initial plant growth. So it requires 1.6 days of downstream operations for each batch of Griffithsin, and then there would be 1.9 days in between batches. So when we put this model together, we started looking at upstream costs. One of the surprising things is to look at the division between upstream and downstream costs, and we're almost equivalent between those two. Many times we would have expected downstream costs to overtake our upstream costs. But looking at upstream costs, this big piece of the pie right here, it's kind of interesting here. Utilities is what that is. You would be surprised at how much of your, especially growing plants, keeping the lights on and keeping them watered, is really your primary upstream cost, and then labor.
In that vein, could I ask a quick question about?
Yes.
What are the volumes of, like, what size would the plant be, like your vessels, to do all of this? If
So,
you do things concurrently, how?
So what we're looking at is a tiered rack system with, I think it was about 1 meter of space height, and I think it's about 1/2 of a meter
So
in.
it's not terribly, it's not like traditional food processing where they have, tanks are 15,000 gallons.
Well, there's multiples of these rooms, and they're all moving the plants in layered. So it's just going to be tiers of plant, like racks, and they're all pneumatically driven, belt driven, and they lower, and so they're going to bring some of them down, and it depends on the stage. The plants are going to be in different stages too, so that's why they was kind of divided up. Sorry, in these different phases, because this represents. So plants in the germination phase, you can get a higher density of plants together, so you can, they take up less space at that point in time during that phase. But then at a certain point, you have to spread them out to allow them to actually add biomass. And then, so they're gonna take up more space during that phase. And then once you inoculate them, you want them segregated from your ones that are not, and so they're gonna take up even an additional space then. And so that's why those are divided up in those different phases. But what we're looking at is a tiered racking system in a environmentally controlled room with LED lighting is what we did our cost estimates. It's similar to some other models for this system that have come out. We kind of try it. It's looking